$30 billion per year over the next 30 years is what Nigeria requires for infrastructure investment. That's from an African Development Bank study. In the aviation industry, critical infrastructure gaps need to be addressed. For participants at an online meeting, private sector funding may just be the way to go for more infrastructure development in the sector. And that's our focus on the program. Plus, Australia and Singapore reopen flights to fully vaccinated persons. Welcome to another edition of Aviation This Week on Channels Television. I'm Bukola Joe Oketumbi, and our background report is next.
The airline industry is a central part of the commercial aviation value and supply chain. Nevertheless, it has the lowest profit margin and return on investments compared to other sectors in the chain. Global airlines agreed to step up plans to tackle climate change as they face mounting pressure from regulators and environmental groups over the impact of billions of extra passengers expected to take to the skies in the coming decades.
Airlines have recognized that we must, as an industry, align our targets with those of the Paris Agreement and accelerate the plans that we had to improve our environmental performance. But it's not without challenge. It will require significant investment on the part of airlines. But more importantly, it's going to require everybody working with us.
While cutting emissions is critical, airlines are still counting the cost of the COVID-19 crisis, which is piling up an estimated $200 billion of losses between 2020 and 2022, with a projection that industry losses next year may plummet to $11.6 billion in 2022.
We still forecast losses in the industry in 2022, but the losses will have significantly reduced to about $12 billion US.
While airlines are on the path to recovery, the global airline body is warning that all planned increases in charges by airports and air navigation providers will stall recovery in the air travel and damage international connectivity. IATA is asking airports and navigation service providers to apply solutions like implementing sustainable cost control measures, tapping shareholders, accessing capital markets, seeking government aid. From the United States to Nigeria, where aviation infrastructure funding is an issue, according to the AFDB study, the country will require $3 trillion in infrastructure spending over the next 30 years. But interested parties at this webinar are calling for private capital investment and good corporate governance as factors that may help address the huge aviation infrastructure deficit in the country.
If Nigeria is, in terms of infrastructure, we are ranking number 23 out of 54 African countries. I'm saying let's even come closer to the continent for us. Let's do better, or let's try to match South Africa. Let's try to match Egypt. Let's try to match Seychelles in terms of this infrastructure and standard.
Air, rail, intermodal connection. He dropped it at the corridor of lack of experts. And I said to myself, many times in Nigeria, aviation proposes, but politics disposes. So it depends on the motive of that rail line from Abuja Airport to town. So we have a lot of issues about issue of master plan and succession.
The most common forms of financing peculiar to the Nigerian aviation sector are secured loans and leases, which do not come cheap.
An airline has an industry margin ranging between 5 to 25% if you can do very well, given the right leadership. But if you are assessing facility, line of support at something beyond your margin, then it becomes a miracle how you can remain sustainable.
Effective corporate governance and best management practice, a vibrant liberalized market, socio-economic stability, as well as institutional, legal, and regulatory monitoring are also germane if Nigeria's aviation industry will attract more investments that can lead to infrastructure growth.
On our interview segment, the former president of the International Civil Aviation Organization Council, Dr. Bernard Aliyu, is our guest, as he spoke extensively at a recent webinar. For him, funding for infrastructure could either be from public or private purses, but asked that businesses take the route of innovation, either in technology or processes, to reduce cost.
In terms of private investment in aviation, Nigeria Airways, you can complain Nigeria Airways were not run well. Are the private airlines being run well? If the private sector can be sold and should be more efficient, what is the result? So there is a common denominator, whether it is public or private. These are cultural issues. Corporate governance is a cultural problem in Nigeria. I try to mention some of those issues. You take the case of Nigerian Airways. We had a lot of discussions as to what to do with the carrier. A lot of analysis. It was saying, okay, liquidate it, get the private sector running, and everything will be perfect. But what has been the result? Yes, private carriers look for funds, they look for profit. Where is the engineering base? Where is the intellectual base? Today, we have a generation gap. I introduced in ICAO a program called the No Country Left Behind to get all the states to be at the same level of operation and to support them. And we redirected the resources of ICAO to that. But 3 years before the end of my tenure, I introduced a program on innovation. As a matter of fact, innovation makes it possible for the benefits of aviation to be brought to the advantage of the civil society. It's a new ball game for us. Whether it is in terms of drone technology, I've seen drones used to head elephants, cattle, to do those basic things, to deliver medicine and blood in developing countries. So you cast your mind to what happened with our telecom sector. When I got my first telephone, it cost me significant amount of money. The challenges is a new dimension. Most of that are happening outside the normal airport environment, where you have the tower and you have the airport, and we're used to that. Very soon, we'll have to change our thinking. A lot of the stakeholders will be town planners because you have UTM, okay? You have operations within the cities. So we have to, and this is coming, and in every aspect I have on my desk here, the last ticket that was issued by IATA before the e-ticketing become in this thing, we're talking about airway bills that are electronic, everything that can be made to make the operations more cost efficient. It's easier. We are speaking to each other now without seeing each other. The same level of innovation is happening. Innovation is opening, again, a new dimension of opportunities for us. What do we need to do? We need to embrace it. We need to provide a platform to be able to use it. And innovation should not only be in technology, but it should be in processes, it should be in approaches, it should be in our thinking. Regulators should be very open to innovation and make it possible for new entrants to come into the industry. Of course, safely. Safety is important, but we should have a listening mode for them, for those new ideas, in order to be able to make use of them. So when you're talking about infrastructure, terminal buildings, and all this, the issue of the possibility for disabled people, people with impaired mobility, people with special needs, being able to use those facilities is important. Because once you pour the concrete, you will find it difficult to retrofit. In all the programs we have to factor that in.
From infrastructure funding to flight reopening in Australia and Singapore.
Australia has eased its international border restrictions on Monday, November 1st, for the first time in the pandemic, allowing some of its vaccinated public to travel freely and many families to reunite, sparking emotional embraces at Sydney's airport. After 18 months of some of the world's strictest coronavirus border policies that banned citizens, unless granted an exemption from coming back into the country, millions of Australians in Victoria, New South Wales and Canberra are now free to travel.
I'll keep them around for you.
A flight by flag carrier Qantas Airways from Los Angeles touched down in Sydney at 6 a.m. The first in months to let the COVID-19 vaccinated Australians walk off a plane without quarantining. One traveler in the airport said returning to air travel was scary and exciting as he came home to see his mother for the first time in 2 years.
And this is the relief of we're finally here. It's been a long week, it's been a long 24 hours. We've been traveling for probably more than that now. And just the relief of seeing them. Sheer gut-wrenching sadness of why I'm here. But you know, you can't fault the fact that you're at least going to, I'm here. You know, so I'm so grateful for that.
Another passenger says the travel changes will immediately aid the economy.
How are you? Oh, so good to see you. Great. It's so happy for the government that they decided to do this. I think it's a great decision in terms of opening everything up again.
Some other families are meeting with mixed feelings.
It's a pretty emotional day today. We lost my father-in-law last week, so it's happy feelings and sad feelings all at the same time, but so glad to see our family finally.
The relaxation of travel rules is tied to rising vaccination rate, with more than 80% of people aged 16 and older in Australia's two most populous states, New South Wales and Victoria, as well as the Capital Territory, fully vaccinated. Australians and permanent residents living abroad may now return, with Foreign Ministry data showing about 47,000 people hoping to do so. Australia closed its borders at the start of the pandemic and let only a limited number of citizens and permanent residents return from abroad, subject to an exemption and a mandatory 14-day quarantine period in a hotel at their own expense. Flight SQ329 landed after a delay in departure from Amsterdam due to air traffic congestion. Singapore already has vaccinated travel lane arrangements with Germany and Brunei, which all allow quarantine-free travel if passengers pass their COVID-19 tests. 8 other countries, including the Netherlands, Britain, France, Spain, and the United States, were added in October, while South Korea will also join on November 15.
Yeah, I think travel in general is a bit challenging at the moment, and yeah, I cannot imagine how we can go back to normal because there's a lot of documents you have to fill out. You have to do a lot of checking the documents in the airports before you go, after when you arrive. So yeah.
I think in this world you need to take safety and precaution very dearly, and I think the Singaporean government is doing that quite well, or very well. But I do appreciate that the family can travel again. I'm planning now myself to go next week on a VTL flight back just to me at the headquarters of the company I'm running here. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity.
The Southeast Asian nation, one of the world's biggest travel and finance hubs, is home to Asian headquarters of thousands of global companies whose executives have long relied on Singapore's connectivity.
When Aviation This Week returns, News Flash is next. To join us again. And House of Representatives Investigative Committee on Federal Government Leases has been visiting the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria, the Nigerian Aviation Handling Company and the Skyway Aviation Handling Company in Lagos. The lawmakers say their agenda is to ensure that the federal government blocks leakages and makes more money to fund the 2022 budget. As part of the recently concluded Aviation Security Week in Lagos, the campaign for airport security has been taken to the host communities. Isolo, Shasha and Ajawo estates in Lagos were part of the community's tour. Here, aviation security officials appeal to community members to see something and say something.
That we've discovered that a lot of people are trying to encroach on the land of the airport, thereby causing security breach at the airport. As we know, aviation is global and it entails a lot of things. We said the security encroachment, how it affects security. People are on the land at the air side of the airport, farming, doing some other things that are detrimental to the aviation industry, which can cause accidents. And when there is accident, it affects everybody. And it's going to be a global issue. And that's why we don't pray for accident. We don't want anything that will encroach on the premises, that will hinder the movement of the aircraft. Apart from that, sir, we discovered that some people are tampering also with the perimeter fence of the airport, and which is very bad also. When we have a house, we put perimeter fence to safeguard the house. And when people try to break the fence, it becomes an offense. Likewise at the airport, the perimeter is very important and we don't need to break the fence.
Security is very, very important. To your house, there should be a security. To the airport, there should be a security. We need people that can work as a security system around the airport, not at alone, at Shasha, at Ijibu, and other places too, that can secure people who want to penetrate or jump from the airport or from airport to the community so that they can secure that place for you.
The lingering shortage of foreign exchange in Nigeria has forced the naira to crash against the United States dollar on the air ticket pricing template of the International Air Transport Association. As a result, airfares on Nigerian routes which are priced in naira have increased considerably, forcing Nigerian travel companies to express fear over this development that this may dampen the recovery of international travel from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, the International Air Transport Association has warned that flights to Nigeria may be hampered because of the $280 million blocked funds of foreign airlines that operate to the country. These funds are ticket sales revenues which Nigeria has been unable to remit to the airlines due to paucity of foreign exchange.
Airlines are hoping to make the most of the opportunity of the reopening of travel corridors to better their businesses as the year winds down, hoping to gradually recover from the COVID-19 losses.
Well, we continue to see very strong leisure demand, and I would say that's back plus. I mean, because of the amount of pent-up demand there were for trips that haven't taken. We actually made some adjustments in our network to reallocate flying from some business markets into leisure markets to meet that demand. And then, the industry is now looking at business travel and seeing how quickly that will come back. At JetBlue, 80% of what we fly is leisure and 20% is business. So we do not have as much exposure to some of the structural longer term risks around business travel. I do believe longer term, most business travel will come back, but I think it could take a few years for us to catch up with where we were back into 2019.
Certainly for the holiday seasons, we're expecting some really strong periods of demand. It's a question yet whether we're going to get. Q3 was a bit of a mixed quarter, is the real story. July was very, very strong for our domestic business, not so strong in August and September. Q4, I think, is going to be the opposite. We've got the bookings weakness will have impacted the beginning part of the period, but as we get to Thanksgiving and Christmas, we've got the opportunity for a strong, solid recovery.
JetBlue is also hoping that the growth continues into 2022.
We were seeing a trend of continued improvement in business travel until a lot of companies then push back their office openings into next year. So I now would expect us to be able to see that trajectory turn up somewhat as we enter the first part of next year.
For aircraft maker Embraer, carbon-efficient planes are necessary in the post-COVID season as the need to make profits collides with the reduction of carbon footprints.
Embraer is in the segment for up to 150 seats, and that's most likely the segment where we see CO2 breakthroughs first, just because we're talking about smaller aircraft and we're talking about smaller range. That also means that in our segment, there will be more technologies available than what our big competitors are talking about, because they have bigger airplanes. So they're talking about hydrogen, for example. They're talking about SAFs, which are all solutions for the future. But we believe from our perspective also electrification and hybrid are solutions that could be applied for the sub-150 seat segment, and then especially up to 50 seats.
Airlines, airports, and plane makers are still facing novel challenges as they turn their attention towards restoring normal operations after being mothballed during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Boeing has signed a deal with Chinese company, the Guangzhou Aircraft Maintenance Engineering Company Limited, to establish two 767 freighter conversion lines next year in Guangzhou, capital of South China's Guangzhou province, as global airlines strive to cushion blows and make more profits from the buoyant air cargo business amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The deal announced at the recently concluded Airshow China 2021 in Guangdong will make Guangzhou the biggest freighter conversion center around the world for Boeing. Gameco, a maintenance, repair and overhaul provider, part owned by China Southern Airlines, already runs 3 737 conversion lines through earlier deals with Boeing. The new deal adds wide-body jets into the mix.
This year, we still hired nearly 600 people in Gameco, because we are growing. We also built a new hangar at the Bayonne Airport that will be ready end of this year. And we are building a maintenance campus with a component center and composite repair center. And these facilities together, I think they will add about 1,500 to 2,000 jobs over the time when they're in full swing.
Aircraft that have been parked because of COVID travel restrictions are the most likely candidates for conversions. Of special interest are models that are about to retire from passenger operations but are still considered young for cargo fleets. With an online shopping boom and an urgent global need for vaccines and medical supplies, it's hardly surprising that airlines are rushing to make up for lost revenues by carrying cargo instead of passengers. The International Air Transport Association projects 30% of global revenues in aviation this year will come from freight, more than doubling pre-COVID level. This is where we wrap it up on the program. Thank you so much for staying with us. It's bye for now. I'm Bukola Jo Oketumbi.